Hello chess lovers, welcome to the new video. So we are going to cover game 4 and just a small intro. So my prediction was not correct. Magnus Carlsen survived on his birthday, and actually one of my viewers pointed out that he already had this experience in a match against Karyakin 5 years ago. They played tie breaks on his birthday, and that was the day when Magnus won convincingly, and also he sacrificed the queen. I remember that move, queen h6, which was nicely pointed out to me by my viewer called Kramnik's Student. Alright, let's look at game 4, the game that Magnus didn't lose. Yeah, I spoiled it, but since I'm recording the day after, I was very busy, plus very tired, so you probably already know the result. Let's go through the moves. So Nepo was black and Magnus was white. e4, e5, knight f3, knight f6, Petrov or the Russian defense. Knight e5, d6. I'm going quickly because these are all known moves. Knight f3, knight e4, d4, d5, and bishop d3, bishop d6. Normal developing moves, some kind of symmetry in the position, castles, castles, and after c4, black cannot maintain the symmetry. I know it's not a complete symmetry because of these knights, but still black cannot maintain the copycat system, because after c5, if he would try that, I think that after cd5, because this knight is hanging, black just loses a pawn, at least. So he has to protect the d5 square. And even though the position is rather symmetrical, white has a slight, not advantage, but maybe a feature that he goes first. Whatever happens, he goes first. So, for example, he is the one that attacked the d5 square and black defended. Alright, so rook e1 was played and black supported the e4 square with bishop f5. And now, since that bishop no longer defends the b7 pawn, a logical move, queen b3, attacking here and sort of attacking here. More putting pressure than attacking, because after queen d7, you can't take that pawn. If you thought that Nepomniachtchi blundered the pawn, there is a rude awakening. This pawn cannot be taken because of bishop h2 check attacking the queen and the king at the same time. Of course, Magnus didn't do that. So he developed knight c3 and Nepo took. And now I looked at this position and Magnus took on f5. But I thought, what if he takes... He cannot take with the pawn because the bishop is hanging. But he can take with the queen and defend that pawn. And I know that this is probably already in the books, but since I'm unfamiliar with the position, I analyzed it by myself and came to a conclusion that this would be very good for black. Let's follow my analysis. Bishop takes on d3, queen takes, dc4, queen c4, and a simple move knight a6, with the idea of going to c7, controlling d5 and playing against this isolated pawn on d4. If black achieves that, he must be better, at least slightly. But of course, the question is, what if white doesn't allow it? What if white starts with knight e5? And it's an interesting move. And if black had to move this queen now, that would give white a nice position, I think, because then it looks like black doesn't reach the blockading position. But black doesn't need to move the queen. I found this move, rook e8, pinning here and allowing these kind of ideas, offering the exchange of queens. And if that doesn't happen, then the queen can anchor herself on d5 and the knight is coming there, and it's a beautiful blockading position against the isolated pawn. So only thing that we need to analyze here is, what if black white captures the queen. Then we take on e1, and white has to give back the extra queen, and this endgame would ensue. And here I think that black can get big advantage. With rook d8, the knight is sort of trapped. It has only one square, because any other square loses material. After knight e5, bishop takes, d takes, rook d1, king e2, rook g1. Now we see this pawn is hanging, and there is a pin here. So, to untangle from here, white would need to move this pawn and move this bishop exactly here to defend the rook. So that's two moves. And to save this pawn, that's three moves. So he needs three tempi to solve his problems. He is on the move, so he has one tempo, but I don't think he has the other two. So I think this would be a terrible position for black. Of course, not everything in this line is forced, but some of the moves are. And they're all pretty logical. So let's go back. So I think this is the reason why white captured on f5 instead of capturing on c3. Queen took on f5, and now I watched one video from one grandmaster when he says that there is a theoretical line that starts with queen b7. What's happening here? I have no idea. So I'm not going to go into that because this is too complicated. Probably only with the help of engines you can find the answer to that question. So Carlsen took on c3. So he didn't go for that. Probably he knows that black can hold there. And now we have the pawn is hanging, so b6, cd5, cd5, queen b5. And that video that I watched, that was made by a grandmaster, in that video, that GM said that because of this pin, white has these ideas, and that's why black played queen d7. But I disagree. Yeah, I disagree with the grandmaster. It is true that there is a pin here, and that there is this kind of move. But there is another problem. And because of this problem, black has to go back. And that problem is the b8 knight. You cannot go to a6, you cannot go to c6. You cannot push the pawn because your b6 pawn is then for free. So where can you develop the knight? You can't. There is only one square, and that's a bad square, because after knight d7, queen c6, this bishop is almost trapped. It cannot go here because of the rook. It cannot go here because of the pawn. Here, the same. If it goes to f4, we exchange, deflect the queen, and take the knight. It cannot go to c7 either because of the queen. It cannot be defended by this queen because the queen needs to protect the knight, and it cannot go here because of the rook. So if it goes there or there to defend, then we take the knight. So bishop has only one square, and that's b8, and that leaves this rook undefended. But we are not going to capture it just yet because there are these ideas. So it's not just that the rook is undefended, it's also that the rooks are not connected. So I think that g3 would be the move here. We stop this check, we threaten to take, but even more so, we threaten to go here, attack the queen, which defends the knight, and also remove the hanging knight, and then capture the rook or the knight. So I don't know, this looks terrible. If you capture here, then we just capture the rook and we win an exchange at minimum. So that was my reasoning why queen d7 was played. So not because of this pin. Yeah, that was true. But the reason is you cannot develop this knight unless you do something about this queen. And a4 was played, queen took, a took, and a5. And I watched the live broadcast, and over there they said that the move that was previously considered or played was b takes a6, but that's a lot of simplification, and it looks like an equal position. But Magnus played knight h4 here, a very tricky move, and a risky move too. Because first, let's see why is it risky. because by not capturing en passant, he leaves black with this distant passed pawn, which is also protected passed pawn. So any pawn endgame is lost. Any pawn endgame, so if you imagine all the pieces gone, is just lost for white. Black wins. Doesn't matter where the kings are, doesn't matter. It's just lost. Okay, if the king is on d5 and the other, maybe that. But any normal pawn endgame is just lost. On the other hand, by not exchanging here with en passant, we keep this knight restricted. Yeah, so it cannot go to some natural squares. Imagine that there is no pawn here and then there and other ideas. So the knight would have to go this way and then to a position from which it can only defend. And also, by moving the knight here, we threaten to go to f5. Let's say black is careless, he develops the knight. After knight f5, again the problem with this bishop. It doesn't have squares. I will show you. All these squares are covered. So it only has, I will mark it with blue color, these two squares. So let's say it goes to b8. If nothing else, we can win a pawn. At minimum, we win a pawn. Is that the best move? I don't know. Maybe rook e7 is the best move. I'm not sure. But if nothing else, we win the pawn. So you still cannot develop this guy. So g6 was played to control f5 square. But now g4. Liberating this square so that these kind of maneuvers are possible. And then why not g3? Why didn't Carlsen play here? Because when the pawn is on g4, there are some extra options. If you can imagine this knight getting, let's say here, attacking the pawn, and black knight getting to f6, defending the pawn, there is an extra option of attacking the knight and winning the d5 pawn. So that's the main idea, I think, of g4 instead of g3. Okay, Nepo developed nonetheless. Knight g2, it looks scary. Knight e3 is in the air. Bishop f4 followed by knight f4 is in the air. But Nepo found a good way to continue. Rook fc8. I like this move. I don't know if he was in his preparation. Magnus for sure was, because in the press conference he mentioned different kind of plans for black, which could in turn lead to trouble or even losing position. And he mentioned that Nepo chose maybe the best or the one that gives the least options to white. So did Nepo find this on the board or did he prepare it at home? I don't know. But one thing is for sure, Magnus has had this position and many other variations of this endgame at home on his board. And he, on top of being the best endgame player in the world, he also studied this exact endgame. So it's a miracle that Nepo didn't lose. So let's see, bishop f4, unless Nepo studied it at home. I don't know. I think he didn't say. So I don't know what. Did he know this position, this endgame, or did he did he find all the moves by himself? So bishop took. I considered during the game bishop f8. It looked interesting to keep the bishop because this pawn will fall, and then maybe we can activate here. But who knows? Maybe this is bad since Nepo took and Magnus took. So this guy is hanging. So we cannot defend it. I mentioned before. If you go with the knight, there are g5 ideas. Kicking the knight and then taking here. So counterattack. Rook c3, knight d5, attacking the rook. Rook d3, attacking the pawn. Don't attack this pawn. That pawn has nothing to do with the game. First of all, you are not threatening because then there is a fork, yeah? And second of all, that pawn is not important. This is the important guy. I mean, it's nice to capture this pawn, but you don't have time. Things are serious, so you need to be accurate. Rook d3. And not only threatening to capture, but also controlling it. For if white saves the pawn, at least it's somewhat tamed, yeah? Rook e7, and you cannot defend the knight because after rook d8 we have a little trick. Rook takes, knight f6. Often there will be some forks with this knight. Just watch and observe. I will not show all of them, but you will see some. So knight came to f8, knight check, king moves, knight check, king moves, and d5. Again protecting the pawn, because if black takes it, the same fork, only the rook is lost on d5 instead of on d7. So I told you, these forks are always in the air. And here, Nepo played so accurately. So, this pawn is nice and protected, but if black doesn't use it now, he might get in trouble. So, a4. Ideally, we don't want to do this. We want to first round up these guys, win them, and then slowly convert our queenside advantage. But we don't have time. I think that we don't have time because ideas like this are in the air, ideas like this are in the air, and all kind of unpleasant business in the center and on the king side. So we need to change our long-term asset into something that can be used immediately. So Nepo played a4, creating counterplay and making white think twice about this kind of maneuver or some slow moves like d6. So knight gave check, king g7 and g5, anchoring the knight here. a3, another good move. So preparing this, this and this, that's a total of 3 moves. And this is the reason why white cannot afford to prepare the push of this pawn. First of all, if he pushes now, oops, sorry, what have I done? Sorry, a3, let's say knight e8 check. Okay, let me first put a few checks that happened in the game. Yeah, in my analysis I put it at the end. So here Magnus repeated for the third time and it was a draw. But let's say he pushes now. So if he pushes that pawn, we have a move knight e6, controlling the promotion square of the d pawn. And now my story of 3 tempi, 1, 2, 3, comes into play. And can white prevent it? It's not clear. It's not clear that he can. So probably there was a good reason that Magnus, instead of pushing, chose to repeat the position for the third time. Okay, so that was a relatively short game with a very interesting endgame in which Magnus showed amazing preparation. It's amazing how deep this guy goes into the positions that can arise from the openings he played. And also, the defense of Nepo was also amazing. The only mystery remains, had Nepo studied that beforehand, or have he found the moves during the game? I don't know the answer. Anyway, I just want to add, this game made me like chess a little bit less. Because if the best endgame player in the world is preparing the endgames that can arise from the opening so deeply, what kind of chance do we mere mortals have when we play? I don't know if I explained my thoughts, but I am a little bit disappointed that the preparation goes so deep. Of course, it's effective, it has to be done, but for us that like to just create stuff on the board, that's a big blow. Thank you for watching and see you tomorrow. Bye!